When I was growing up, Iran was always the next one. You heard it constantly, the next target, the final piece. Take out Iran and the Middle East is reshaped forever. I remember it as a kid, politicians talking about it, news anchors talking about it, Israeli officials talking about it for 30 years. Iran, Iran, Iran. The regime that had to go, the nuclear threat that had to be stopped, the last domino. On the 28th of February 2026, they finally did it. Nearly 900 strikes in 12 hours. The supreme leader of Iran dead. His defense minister dead. The chief of staff of the armed forces dead. The commander of the Revolutionary Guard dead. The entire top leadership of the Iranian state killed in a single opening salvo. Operation Epic Fury. The Americans and Israelis had planned this for years. They had weakened Iran's allies, degraded its proxies, damaged its nuclear program in the 12-day war in June 2025, watched the Iranian population protest in the streets, watched the economy collapse under sanctions. They calculated that Iran had never been weaker, that the regime was rotten from the inside, that the strikes would shatter the structure and the people would finish the job. What happened next surprised them. It should not have, but it did. Within hours, Iran had fired back. Pre-planned counterstrikes, ballistic missiles and drones hitting Israel, hitting American bases across the Gulf, hitting military and civilian locations in Arab states housing US forces. The Revolutionary Guard commanders who were still alive were loyal to the mission, not the man. New leadership coalesced around Ali Larijani almost immediately. The Strait of Hormuz closed. Oil went above $100 a barrel. Every front in the region activated simultaneously. The Houthis in Yemen firing, Hezbollah reactivating in Lebanon, Iraqi militias launching drones at American bases. The decapitation strike was supposed to end the war before it started. Instead, it started a war that 4 months later has no clear endpoint. And the question that nobody in Washington or Tel Aviv seems to want to answer directly is, how did they get this so wrong? The answer starts with who they were actually fighting. Look at what Israel spent the previous 2 years doing. Gaza, Hamas, fighters, lightly armed, no air force, no navy, no ballistic missiles operating in tunnels under a strip of land, 365 square kilometers. 18 months of the most intensive urban military campaign since the Second World War. The most advanced military in the Middle East with full American backing, and Hamas was not destroyed. The tunnels are still there, the fighters are still there, Gaza is rubble and Hamas is still functioning. Lebanon, Hezbollah, more capable than Hamas, longer range missiles, trained fighters with real combat experience, but still a non-state actor, no conventional military structure, no strategic depth, no industrial base. Israel degraded Hezbollah significantly in 2024, killed its leadership, reduced its arsenal. It was a genuine military success by any honest assessment. Then they looked at Iran and applied the same logic. If we can degrade Hezbollah, if we can degrade Hamas, if we can kill the leadership, the structure will collapse. And Iran is not Hamas, Iran is not Hezbollah. Iran is not any adversary Israel has faced in its history. Iran has 80 million people. It is the 17th largest country on earth by area. It has 580,000 active military personnel and 350,000 reserves. It has the largest ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East. Not the largest that Iran had before the strikes, the largest that survived the strikes. It has a domestic defense manufacturing capacity built specifically over 40 years of sanctions for exactly this scenario. Drones, missiles, electronic warfare systems, all built domestically, because Iran knew that the day this war started, no one would be selling them weapons. They prepared for being alone. They built the arsenal they would need when alone. And then there is the terrain. Iran is not flat. It is not the desert that American air power dominated in Iraq in 1991 and 2003. It is mountains. The Zagros range running for 1,600 kilometers through the west of the country. The Alborz range in the north. Valleys, passes, natural defensive positions that make the idea of a ground campaign the kind of campaign that would be required to actually occupy and hold territory. A military planner's nightmare. If Afghanistan was the graveyard of empires in mountains that are difficult to navigate, Iran is Afghanistan scaled up by a factor of 10 with an industrial base and a modern military. But here is the thing that should have told America and Israel everything they needed to know. The thing that is documented, historical, proven, 1980. Iraq invades Iran. Saddam Hussein launches a full-scale military invasion expecting a quick victory against a revolutionary regime in chaos. The Islamic Republic is 1 year old. The army has been purged. The country is in political turmoil. All the external analysis says Iran is vulnerable. Iraq has Western backing, Soviet backing, Arab backing. France is selling Saddam weapons. The United States is providing intelligence. The entire weight of superpower support is behind the invasion. 8 years later, 1 million people are dead. The border is in almost exactly the same place it was in 1980. Iran did not win, but Saddam Hussein did not win. Against a country backed by America, the Soviet Union, France, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and most of the Arab world simultaneously, Iran did not capitulate. Took 1 million casualties, sent waves of young men across minefields, lost cities, lost territory, took it back, lost it again, and did not stop until a ceasefire both sides had run out of capacity to refuse. That is the country America and Israel calculated would fold when they killed the supreme leader and the top military command in the first 12 hours of Operation Epic Fury. I want to be clear about something before we go further. I am not a supporter of the Iranian regime. It has its very serious problems, but I do have a specific respect for what the Iranian people have demonstrated throughout their history. These are people who will fight for their country to the last. The loyalty to the Islamic Republic is real in ways that Western analysts consistently underestimate because they mistake hatred of the government for willingness to see the country destroyed by a foreign power. These are not the same thing. You can hate your government and still pick up a weapon when a foreign army attacks your land. The Germans in 1945. The Soviet citizens of Leningrad who survived 872 days of siege and 800,000 civilian deaths rather than surrender. The Vietnamese who absorbed the most intensive aerial bombardment in the history of warfare and did not break. The Afghans who outlasted the British Empire, the Soviet Union and NATO, 3 of the greatest military forces in history, and ended up with the Taliban back in Kabul after 20 years and $2.3 trillion of American spending. A population fighting on its own land for its own survival fights differently from any military fighting a political objective somewhere else. The maths of motivation are not equal. American soldiers in Afghanistan were fighting for a policy. Afghan fighters were fighting for their home, their family, their village, their religion, their way of life. Those are not equivalent motivations. The Americans eventually went home. Now the question of what America actually gains from this, because this is the one that nobody in mainstream media is asking with the directness it deserves. The stated objectives of Operation Epic Fury were to degrade Iran's nuclear program, its ballistic missile capacity, its navy, its drone capability, and its control of regional proxy forces. Fine. Take those at face value, say they achieve all of them. Iran's nuclear program is set back by a decade, its missile arsenal is reduced, its navy is damaged, Hezbollah is further weakened, the Houthis are degraded. What does America have after all of that? An Iran that is enraged, unified around anti-American nationalism, still in possession of a state, still with 80 million people, and with a new leadership that has every political incentive to rebuild exactly the capacities that were destroyed and more. And a Strait of Hormuz that Iran has demonstrated it can close at will, as long as the conflict continues. The Strait of Hormuz handles approximately 20% of global oil and gas flows. Every day it is closed or restricted oil stays above $100 a barrel. Energy bills across Europe climb. Economies that were already stressed by the post-2022 energy crisis get hit again. The British government is hosting summits trying to reopen the strait. British jets have already been flying strikes in Syria. The British public was never asked whether this was what they wanted their country to do. America does not gain an oil deal by destroying Iran. China already has oil deals with Iran. Russia already has relations with Iran. The idea that regime change produces a democratic, Western-aligned, grateful Iran that opens its oil fields to American companies is the same idea that produced the Iraq invasion in 2003. The grateful democratic Middle East did not materialize in 2003. There is no particular reason to believe it materializes in Iran in 2026, and the regime change question is the one where the American calculation has been most nakedly exposed as wishful thinking. Trump's stated hope was that the Iranian population, already protesting against the regime, would seize the opportunity of the strikes to conduct their own revolution, that the people who had been demonstrating against the government in January 2026, would, when America started bombing their cities, decide this was the moment to finish the job. This is the same calculation that American planners made about Iraq in 2003. The population hates Saddam, they will greet us as liberators. The population did hate Saddam. They did not greet the Americans as liberators, they spent 20 years fighting them. The protests in Iran in January 2026 were real. The economic grievances driving them were real. The anger at the regime was real. And the moment American and Israeli bombs started hitting Iranian cities, the political character of those protests transformed. Nationalism does not disappear when your country is attacked, it intensifies. The Iranians demonstrating against their government in January 2026 are not the same political force as Iranians watching their capital bombed in March 2026. These are not the same people making the same calculations. That transformation was predictable. It was predicted. The analysts who said it would happen were ignored because the opportunity seemed too good to pass up. Now the UK angle. Because Britain is in this whether it admits it or not. Starmer condemned Iranian counterstrikes on the 28th of February in a joint statement with Macron and Scholz. British RAF Typhoons have been conducting strikes in Syria on what the Ministry of Defence describes as suspected arms caches previously used by ISIS. The official British position is that the UK is not a party to the US-Israeli military campaign against Iran specifically. The unofficial reality is that British jets are flying in the same airspace, British bases are being used for logistics, and Britain is hosting summits on reopening the Strait of Hormuz while oil above $100 a barrel drives British energy costs back to crisis levels. The British public was not consulted on any of this. There was no parliamentary vote on British involvement in the strikes. There was no public debate about whether Britain's interests were served by the conflict. The same political class that sent British soldiers to Afghanistan for 20 years and to Iraq for reasons that turned out not to exist, has once again committed British resources and British exposure to a regional conflict without asking the people paying for it what they think. Britain gains nothing from this war. Britain has no nuclear threat from Iran. Britain has trade interests in the Gulf that are actively damaged by the Strait of Hormuz closure. British energy bills are climbing because of a conflict Britain was never asked to endorse. Now where does this go? Because the honest answer is that nobody knows, and the people who should be honest about not knowing are instead projecting confidence. The United States does not have the political will for an Iranian ground campaign. Trump campaigned against foreign wars. The American public does not want it. The military cost of a ground invasion of Iran, 80 million people, mountainous terrain, a population that fought for 8 years against Iraq without capitulating, is not something any American president can sell to an electorate that watched Afghanistan for 20 years. Without a ground campaign, air power alone does not achieve regime change. It achieves damage. Iran rebuilds. Iran rebuilds regardless. Every weapon destroyed is replaced. Every destroyed facility is rebuilt, probably deeper underground next time. Sanctions and strikes have been the Western approach to Iran's nuclear program for 20 years. Iran's nuclear program kept advancing. The strikes of 2025 and 2026 set it back. They did not end it. The historical pattern is clear. Countries that decide to develop nuclear weapons and have the industrial capacity to do so eventually succeed, unless the regime is removed and replaced by one that chooses not to pursue them. The regime has not been removed. The new leadership has every political incentive to accelerate exactly the program that was targeted. Israel has accomplished something in this campaign. It killed Khamenei, it degraded real military capabilities, it demonstrated that it can strike Iran's leadership in Tehran. These are not nothing. But the strategic objective, a durable resolution to the Iranian nuclear threat, has not been achieved, and the conditions for achieving it are not obviously better than they were before Operation Epic Fury began. The broader lesson that keeps needing to be relearned is the same lesson Iraq taught and Afghanistan reinforced. Military strikes can achieve military objectives, they cannot achieve political objectives. You can destroy a nuclear facility with a missile. You cannot destroy the political will to rebuild it with a missile. You can kill a supreme leader. You cannot kill the political system that produced him and will produce his successor. Iran has been preparing for this war since 1979. 47 years of sanctions, isolation, and the specific knowledge that Israel and America considered the Islamic Republic an existential enemy. They built their military doctrine around fighting without allies, without resupply, without international support. They built the drone capabilities, the missile arsenals, the domestic manufacturing base, the tunnel networks, all of it, specifically because they knew this day was coming. America and Israel knew Iran had done all of this. The intelligence was not secret, and they still calculated that the regime would fold when the top leadership was killed. They were wrong. The IRGC commanders executed the pre-planned counterstrike within hours of the opening salvo. The political leadership coalesced, the strait closed, the proxies activated, the population that had been protesting against its government rallied around its country. In the Iran-Iraq War, Iran's Ayatollah Khomeini described the conflict as a blessing in disguise, because external threat unified the revolutionary government against a population that might otherwise have turned against it. The 2026 strikes have produced the same dynamic. The protests of January 2026 cannot now be the political force they might have been, because the political context has been changed by the attacks. The Iranian people fighting for Iran is a different political configuration from the Iranian people fighting against the Islamic Republic. This is the specific miscalculation that Israel and America made. They saw a weakened regime, a protesting population, a nuclear program on the back foot. They saw an opportunity. What they failed to fully account for is that attacking a country does not just affect the regime, it affects the population's relationship to the conflict. And 80 million people who will fight for their country to the last man are not an opponent that air power alone defeats. The 12-day war in June 2025 should have told them this. Iran absorbed that campaign, lost nuclear facilities, lost military leaders, lost significant capabilities, and then spent the following 9 months rebuilding, reorganizing, pre-positioning counter-strike authorities so that when the next attack came, the response would be immediate and overwhelming. They were prepared. America and Israel were not prepared. For how prepared they were, that is the story of Operation Epic Fury. Not a quick occupation, not a quick deal, not the collapse that was predicted by every hawk who had been saying for 30 years that Iran was next and that it would be straightforward. A war with no clear endpoint, oil above $100, a strait closed to global shipping, British jets in Syrian airspace without a parliamentary vote, and an Iranian state that is damaged, enraged, unified, and still standing. Nobody who told you this would be quick has apologized yet. They will not. Let me go deeper into the Iran-Iraq War because most people do not know this history, and it is the most important context for understanding what happened in February 2026. Saddam Hussein invaded Iran on September 22nd, 1980. He expected it to be over in weeks. His army was equipped with Soviet tanks, French aircraft, American intelligence. The Iranian military had been decimated by the revolutionary purges of 1979 and 1980. Officers who had served under the Shah had been executed or imprisoned. The remaining forces were poorly organized. Western analysis at the time said Iran could not mount an effective defense for more than a few weeks. Iran held. Not because its military was superior, because its population was willing to absorb casualties at a rate that Saddam Hussein and his Western backers had not calculated for. Child soldiers, human wave attacks, teenage boys sent across minefields to clear the path for regular forces. The Basij, the paramilitary volunteer force, mobilized hundreds of thousands of men who had no military training and threw them at Iraqi positions. Iran's strategy was not sophisticated, it was simple. We have more people willing to die for this country than you have ammunition to kill them. 8 years, 1 million dead, cities destroyed, economies wrecked on both sides, and at the end of it, the border was almost exactly where it had started. Western analysts described it at the time as a senseless conflict. What they were actually observing was what happens when a population decides its survival is worth any cost. That is not senseless. That is the most rational possible calculation from the perspective of the people making it. Better to fight and lose 1 million people than to surrender and lose your country. The Iranian military that fought Iraq in 1980 to 1988 was the military that rebuilt itself over the following decades, specifically to ensure it would never be as vulnerable again. The missile program that America targeted in 2026 was built in the shadow of the Iran-Iraq War. The drone program was built in the shadow of the Iran-Iraq War. The tunnel networks were built in the shadow of the Iran-Iraq War. Every Iranian military planner of the past 40 years has had that conflict as the foundational reference point. What happened when we were weak, what it cost, what we needed to build so it would never happen like that again. America's military planners know this history. The intelligence community knows this history. The think tanks in Washington have written thousands of pages about it. And yet, the calculation that was made in the winter of 2025 to 2026 was that the combination of Iran's weakened state, the protests, the sanctions damage, the degraded proxies, represented an opportunity that was worth the risk. There is a specific arrogance in this, not the arrogance of ignorance, the arrogance of exceptionalism, the belief that America's military technology, America's precision strike capability, America's intelligence advantage means that the historical pattern does not apply, that this time it will be different, that this time the population will not rally, that this time the decapitation of leadership will produce the collapse instead of the consolidation that history consistently shows it produces. Iraq, 2003. America killed Saddam Hussein's sons in July 2003 and Saddam himself was captured in December 2003. The leadership was gone, the regime was gone, the country did not stabilize, it descended into a sectarian civil war that killed hundreds of thousands of people, created the conditions for the emergence of ISIS, and produced a government that is today closer to Iran than to America. The decapitation of leadership did not produce the outcome the planners expected. Libya, 2011, Gaddafi was killed by his own population with NATO air support. The regime was gone, Libya has not had a stable government since. It has had a permanent civil war between competing factions. The decapitation of leadership did not produce the outcome the planners expected. The pattern is documented, consistent. And it keeps being ignored because the alternative, accepting that there are situations where military force cannot achieve political objectives, where the population will not respond to external intervention in the way the planners hope, is too difficult for a certain kind of strategic culture to accept. Now, the specific numbers on what America has spent and what it has gotten for that spending. Afghanistan, 20 years, $2.3 trillion, 2,461 American soldiers killed, 20,589 wounded. The Taliban are back in Kabul. The government America built and funded and supported for 20 years collapsed in 11 days, when the US withdrew. The country is worse by most measurable indicators than it was before America arrived. The investment produced nothing durable. Iraq, the Iraq War cost approximately $2 trillion, 4,431 American soldiers killed, 31,994 wounded. Saddam Hussein is gone. Iraq is today governed by parties aligned with Iran. The country America invaded to eliminate Iranian influence in the region is today one of Iran's primary regional allies. The investment produced the opposite of its stated objective. And yet here is America again. A new country, a new conflict, the same calculation, strike the leadership, degrade the military, hope the population finishes the job. What does America actually gain if everything goes according to the best case plan? Iran's nuclear program is set back a decade. Good. But Iran's desire for a nuclear program, which is fundamentally a deterrence program, built specifically because Iran is surrounded by nuclear-armed states, including Israel, Pakistan, and American forces, does not go away. The motivation remains. The industrial capacity to eventually rebuild remains. A decade from now, a new Iranian government, whatever its character, will be making the same calculations about security and deterrence that the Islamic Republic has been making since 1979. The Strait of Hormuz reopens, eventually. It has to. It is also in Iran's economic interest. But the leverage Iran has demonstrated, the ability to threaten 20% of global oil flows, that leverage does not disappear. It has been demonstrated. It will be remembered. The next time America considers military action against Iran, the memory of $100 oil and European energy bills and British summits trying to reopen the strait will be part of the strategic calculation. Iran's proxy network is further degraded, Hezbollah weaker, Houthis under sustained pressure, Iraqi militias constrained. Good from an Israeli perspective. But the proxy network that Iran built over 40 years was built precisely because Iran understood it could not fight America directly on equal terms. The proxies were the instrument of asymmetric pressure. Degrade them and Iran invests in rebuilding them. probably with different architecture, probably more distributed, probably harder to degrade the next time. None of this produces a durable strategic outcome. It produces a different threat configuration that requires a different response in 10 years. The Israeli perspective is different from the American one, and it is worth being honest about that distinction. For Israel, the elimination of Iran's nuclear program is genuinely existential in the way it is not for America. A nuclear-armed Iran pointed at Israel is a direct threat to Israeli survival in a way that has no American equivalent. The Israeli strategic logic for the strikes is coherent in its own terms, even if the execution has produced outcomes nobody fully anticipated. The American strategic logic is harder to defend. America is not under direct military threat from Iran. America's interests in the Gulf are primarily economic. Oil flows, regional stability, preventing any single power from dominating the Gulf and its resources. All of those interests are better served by a diplomatic framework than by a military campaign that has closed the Strait of Hormuz and driven oil above $100. The people who designed Operation Epic Fury are not stupid. They understood the risks. They made a calculation that the opportunity, Iran weakened, protests active, proxies degraded, nuclear program set back, was worth those risks. The question is whether that calculation has proven correct. 4 months later, a conditional ceasefire is holding badly. Pakistan is mediating, the strait is still effectively closed, oil is still above $100, British energy bills are climbing, the Iranian state is still standing, the new leadership is consolidated, the Iranian population is unified around national survival rather than divided by domestic grievance. That is the scorecard of Operation Epic Fury at 4 months. The people in Washington and Tel Aviv who called this right, who said Iran would fight, who said the population would not simply rise against the regime when bombs started falling, who said the strait would close and stay closed, who said the proxy network would not simply collapse. Those people were sidelined or ignored in the months before the strikes. The people who said Iran was weak, the regime was rotten, the population was ready to revolt, the strikes would be decisive, those people were listened to. The same pattern, every time. Nobody who told you this would be quick has apologized yet. The same analysts who said Iraq would be straightforward, who said Afghanistan was winnable, who said Libya's fall would produce stability. They are on television right now explaining why the situation in Iran is complicated, but fundamentally proceeding according to plan. It is not proceeding according to plan. The plan assumed Iran would not fight this hard. The plan assumed the population would not rally. The plan assumed the decapitation of leadership would produce fracture rather than consolidation. Iran fought this hard. The population rallied, the leadership consolidated, Israel and America underestimated Iran. They underestimated it in exactly the way that powerful countries consistently underestimate opponents they have decided are weaker. By confusing the weakness of the regime's popularity with the weakness of the people's will to fight. By confusing the degradation of proxies with the degradation of the core. By confusing the opportunity to strike with the wisdom of striking. The question of what comes next is genuinely open. A deal is possible. An escalation is possible. A prolonged, frozen conflict is possible. What is not possible, barring a ground invasion that America does not have the political will to launch, is the clean, decisive outcome that Operation Epic Fury was designed to produce. Iran is still there, damaged, enraged, unified, and still there. That was not the plan.